Right, greetings, hello, welcome back to the Philosophy Club. This is the last one of 2024, in fact, because it's nearly the end of the year. We're in that quiet time between Christmas and New Year, and I mean, it has been quite a year, 2024. I think as years go, it's been challenging for many people on the planet. And so I think we're all going to be happy to see it, say goodbye. But God knows what the next one's going to bring. I mean, is it going to be any better or is it going to be worse? One lives on the edge of one seat watching this movie, right, called The World movie. I'm seeing some very crazy noises coming out of the USA with Trump's administration waiting in the wings, threatening to go to war with Canada and Mexico and Panama simultaneously. They're flexing their muscles to make America great again, as if... And I read a very interesting piece in the Washington Post about it's like putting back diplomacy by decades, the theory that you... Oh, and they want Greenland as well, apparently. Trump wants Greenland. So what are they going to do? I mean, go to war with all their local... I mean, maybe he's copying Putin's playbook, just invade local people. Like, if Putin can get away with it, so can I. Invade Greenland. Because Greenland's got lots of rare earths, and it's worth a lot of money, you can mine it. And there are Chinese companies already interested. So America wants to get in there and stop China, which is the great bugbear of everyone. So, I hope we don't go down that route of geopolitical... chaos. As the chairman of the World Intellectual Wisdom Forum, we're calling for a more rational, sane world order, not a disorder. The Washington Post piece argues that Trump is deliberately following Nixon, who created the image of himself as a crazy president in order to worry opponents in other countries that they don't know what he's going to do next. He's crazy, he might invade, he might bomb us. So Trump is doing Nixon on steroids, but personally, I find all that very, very childish and passé. We shouldn't be playing to the gallery like that. It's a real throwback. Pre-Kennedy. I mean, Kennedy was a president, and Eisenhower was quite a good president. They realised that for a world we have to somehow live in harmony with other powers and have some kind of détente or coexistence with them, even if we don't agree with them, and then defer to the UN and other bodies to mediate and arbitrate and so on. So we need to watch that space with care. Yes, so it's been quite an interesting week. I'll share a few things of what I've been up to. The most important, I suppose, is publishing my grand oeuvre, the 99 Names of Peace, which I've been talking about during these meetings. And I finally published it, and I kept my word. I sent it out to many friends on Christmas Day as a present, as a huge PDF of 1,200 pages, because, hey, this is a big work, right? When it's published, it'll be 2 volumes, 600 pages each. And I've really enjoyed doing it. I mean, it's been intellectually interesting and challenging, but exploring all these obscure languages, Kashmiri, which I didn't really understand how it works, and I didn't understand its significance intellectually. And Sindhi, I really didn't know about Sindhi, which is spoken by millions of people in Pakistan. It's the most, particularly in the south, and it's again a descendant from ancient Sanskrit, and it has a huge literature. It's got a lot of Arabic influence, obviously it's an Islamic culture. Assamese, another fascinating language, in the other part of north-east India. Along the Brahmaputra River is where the Assamese people live. And that's the only river that is male in the kind of mental cosmology of the people. The other rivers, Sarasvati, Indus, they're all seen as female. Brahmaputra is male. It's the son of Brahma. And that has significance, which I've explored in the book. And then I did the Ainu language in the north of Japan, which is fascinating. These ancient prehistoric descendants who have this extraordinary ritual sending the bear home, which I talked about, I think. And then the Dogon people, the last ones, the African people from Mali, who have this sacred star knowledge that they believe their ancestors came from another star system around the Sirius stars. So it's been absolutely amazing journey, and to get this out is great. And when it's published, I will let colleagues know they can, you can buy a copy on my publishing website. But also the good news is I'm now working on the accompanying text, which is the actual dictionary. So the 99 Names of Peace has got a huge amount of data about the languages, but also associated projects, because it's 99 projects for peace, one per per language. So for instance, the one that goes with the Dogon one, the last one, is called Stellar Evolution and the Future of Humanity. And I think we've got to crack the speed of light. Eventually, we as humanity have to be able to move faster than light to be able to explore other parts of the universe. We can never do that if we're stuck to light speed. Well, how are we going to crack the speed of light? Well, we need a team of great physicists and aerospatial engineers and people working on that. But it has to be an international team, best brains of America, China, Russia, Europe, France, the Arab world, Middle East, Israel, all working on this together like the Manhattan Project was. It'll be huge. And it can't be done whilst the current geopolitical instability is happening on the planet. Because if one nation gets this knowledge first, they'll be like superpower status and be able to attack and destroy all the others. And that's not on. So I believe that it'll only happen when we get a proper planetary federation and we get a team of scientists pledged to working for the well-being of the whole planet and of humanity. Then that knowledge will come through. So that's the last project, the 99th project, which is very important, obviously. And we won't be, we're going to have to do that eventually, so why not start now, is what I'm saying. And there are scientists working around the world who are working on this and exploring the details of the physics of faster than light speed. People have already explored this in relation to quantum, like jumping of information and data, but that's not good enough. We've got to actually be able to move light ships or ships faster than light, and humans, and actually move about. So anyway, that's the last project, which fittingly is married with the Dogon language. So each project of the 99 is married to a related language. And it's just really exciting. So please read the book, look at it. It's like an encyclopedia, really, and awesome. So, talking of encyclopedias, I want to share something else. The Grand Dictionnaire Encyclopédique Larousse, which is French. It's one of the great books of the French culture. And I've been studying the works of Pascal, the great philosopher. There's a very good entry on him in here. And I just want to share a little bit about him before we start. He belongs here in the Philosophy Club. If he were in person, he could come along. I didn't realise how young he was to have done all he did. He was born in 1623 in Clermont-Ferrand in Auvergne, which I know and love as a city. And it's got a huge statue of Vercingetorix in the middle of the town square, made by Bartholdi, who designed the Statue of Liberty, who was a French sculptor, savant, and a Freemason, and a mystic. Anyway, so Pascal initiated himself into mathematics by reading Euclid. And before he'd even reached the age of 16, he wrote a treatise on conic sections. And he proposed new methods And he was away, he hit the ground running. He was already doing advanced mathematics. In 1642, whilst the English were in the middle of a civil war and killing each other because they had different hairstyles, the Puritans had kind of like very short hair, the Cavaliers had long hair. He was inventing effectively a sort of early computer, an arithmetic machine. And so his father, who was also a mathematician, amateur, he became a member of the Academy in Paris. And so he was a very advanced scientist, but he was also interested in spirituality. And he got interested in a particular branch of Catholicism associated with Jansen, called Jansenism, which wanted to take the idea of predestination and grace seriously, based on Augustine's ideas that you are bound for heaven through God's grace, and he believed that. Anyway, he then continued, and he wrote many treatises, and he wrote his famous Meditations, which were more philosophical. And his famous wager that is, taught in sixth form philosophy clubs, that there may or may not be a God, the Bible may or may not be true, heaven may or may not exist, but, it would be intelligent to assume there's something behind all that and act as if, and then try and live a moral and righteous life as if all that's true. Because if you do live a moral and righteous life, then you have the pleasure that comes from that during your lifetime. And after death, if there's nothing left, then it doesn't matter anyway. At least you've left good memories and good deeds for the planet. But on the other hand, if it is true, then you get a double reward. You have the reward of happiness during a lifetime, and also the happiness of trying to help others, and so on, and then the bliss of the celestial kingdoms. On the other hand, if you say, like many people in Pascal's time are beginning to say, no, it's not true, there's no evidence for God, no evidence for the soul, it's not true, so I'm going to live the life of a riotous libertine and just sleep with everyone I can and do the Marquis de Sade stuff and hurt people and call it pleasure and live a sort of peculiar kind of immoral life. And it turns out that actually there is a judgment and there is a life after death, and you do have to pay account for your actions. Then Pascal said, no, it's if you weigh this up, you've got an eternity of suffering for a little bit of self-discipline now. Certainly it's worth it. Anyway, these are interesting ideas, and he wrote all this stuff down, and then he died at the tender age, I can't believe this, of like 29? He died in 1662, so, no, 39 he was. Which is, I suppose some people just do their work early, don't they? So I was looking for a very good intellectual biography of Pascal, and I've discovered someone's writing one at the moment, which will be out next year. It's advertised on Amazon, a new intellectual biography of Pascal, the first for decades in English, which I'm going to get as soon as it comes out. So, yes, I think what I like about him is that he combined spirituality with science. And I think that's the way to go as a philosopher. We should have the best of science and the best of spirituality together. So anyway, there's the entry. Is there anything in there I missed out that we should tell listeners? I don't think he was married. I couldn't spot anything in there. His personal life.
physics pressure unity, standard unity, isn't the Pascal? Isn't
It's named after him.
Yes,
I
I
believe
guess.
so. Yeah, he was experimenting with different air pressures and stuff, and the Puy de Dôme up on the volcanoes. Yes, his scientific achievements were pretty polymathic, I think. But those were glorious times, mid 17th century, and both in Britain and in France, it was the beginning of scientific exploration and so on. So anyway, thank you, Pascal, for your example to us all. And so let me share the other things I've been doing. It's been fascinating to revisit, as it was Christmas. I've been listening to the diskette of my commentary on the New Testament, which I recorded living at the Castle of the Muses in Scotland. And I've started with the commentary on St Matthew, which is one of the longest of the commentaries. It's, I don't write small, it's like 800 pages of text, but I'm listening to the talking book. And I have to say, it's absolutely fascinating. I haven't listened to this for 13 years since recording it. And at that time, I was living in paradise in the castle in Scotland, surrounded by all kinds of esoteric books, which I have here. But I was using also the library of the University of Glasgow, which has a tremendous theological section. And I brought home all kinds of obscure books on. I would often drive into Glasgow and get 30 books out and then have them for the commentaries. So, for instance, today I've been listening. What I'm exploring, because it's not just this commentary on Matthew straight. It's a commentary on all the things Matthew doesn't tell us, and the bits he leaves out. So I've put in there the proto-evangelium, the evangelium of James, which is the backstory of the Virgin Mary. Who were her parents, Joachim and Anna? Why was she brought up in the temple as a sort of assistant in the temple? What was the story there? That's all given in this obscure text, the Proto-Evangelium, which I read in full and I comment on. And it's the backstory of the Christmas story, because obviously that's how it happened. And I think that everyone who wants to understand Christianity should know this book. It was a great Samuel called Guillaume Postel, who was a librarian for Francis I, the Renaissance king here in France, and patron of Leonardo, that really popularised the Proto-Evangelium. And it's so I do that. I also explore the likely influence on the young boy Jesus, the young mind growing up, of Ecclesiasticus, which is a great text written by someone called Jesus ben Sirach in Alexandria. And there's whole passages in there that you can see the young Jesus reading and thinking, God, I'm going to do that. It talks about how if you're serious about learning and wisdom, you have to devote yourself to the goddess of wisdom. And if you do, she will adopt you and make you her son. And if she accepts you as the son of the goddess of wisdom, then you can do great things for the world. Now I can see the boy Jesus reading this and thinking, yeah, I'm going to do that when I grow up. I want to be a son of the goddess of wisdom. And as I explained in the commentary, this is like the backstory of Christ's teaching career. He studied all this stuff, both in Galilee and also probably in Alexandria in Egypt, where his parents obviously had connections. And then I quote from the Psalms of Solomon, which was also around 100 years before Jesus. He would have read them. And the Psalms of Solomon are, we have the Psalms of David in the Bible, but the Psalms of Solomon, I think, are more important. With all due respect to David, his Psalms are a bit whiny. It's like, I'm really special and I'm being beaten up by all my friends. Help me, God. Sort of whining all the time. Whereas the Psalms of Solomon are what you'd expect. They're pure wisdom. They're the double malt of wisdom for the Psalm kingdom. And again, huge passages of the goddess of wisdom will inspire you if you love her, which is Solomon's teaching, and it comes through these Psalms. And Jesus would have read that. And there are whole passages that then recur in a sort of, like a daguerreotype version in the actual text of Matthew. So what I'm trying to do in this commentary is source the actual text of Matthew going further back. And I have to say it is pretty awesome. And there is, that I know, there's nothing else like this. I've done to the Gospels the same as I did to the Quran, trying to go right back to the influences on both Jesus and Muhammad and see how their thought world formed. And it, it's pretty interesting stuff, actually, re-listening to it. And the good news is, it was all just transcribed by my last work away here. So these Gospels, the commentaries on Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Thomas and Mary Magdalene, all 6 Gospel commentaries will be published over the next few months, once I've had a chance to edit the transcribed texts. And I can't wait to get a copy myself. So that's been really interesting. And I've been also active with an old project I used to work on at the Castle of the Muses to make a film about Druids. Working with a team of us, we were filming and interviewing the senior Druids, and that film has still not been broadcast. It's still not been taken out of its case and made available to the public. So it's a small team of us. I'm just a kind of consultant on the project, but other people involved are the actual film people. We're going to try and get this shown at film festivals, and hopefully we'll get it broadcast sometime in the next year or two. So I've been involved with that, which is, it's been a while coming, but hey, Druids have been around thousands of years. It's only been a couple of decades here. Takes a while to get active. So that's all good. And yes, the same day that I was meeting with colleagues to talk about the Druid film, some local people moved into the village who've just come from Anglesey, which was the Druid island heartland of Britain, where I've done meetings for peace. And they just turned up, they moved all their stuff here, like a huge lorry load, bought a big house here in the village, kind of even bigger than this one, a sort of, and they've got a family of 4 kids and grandparents, and they've all come from Anglesey. So I took that as a sign of Druid backup. So that's good. And it's nice to welcome new, children to the village and so on. So that's all the end of the year story, really. And I'll just share the saints and sages of today. Today being the 29th of December. And for Christians today, we celebrate Alfonso the Wise. He's not an official saint, but he is in my dictionary of saints and sages, because he was a sage king, and he's the only Spanish king called the Wise. He lived from 1221 to 1284, was king of Castile, and it was in his court that the modern Spanish language of Castilian was first developed as a learned literary language. And he had scholars at his court translating Arabic works into Latin and into Spanish. He was himself very interested in astrology and science, and he had Arabs in his kingdom who were learned people, and he sponsored them to share their writings and books. And he commissioned something called the Alphonsine Tables, which was like a sort of almanac of what's going on in the sky at any time. You could look it up 10, 20 years from now and see where the planets will all be. So a great man, actually. And today also we celebrate Sebastian Castellio, 1515 to 1563, who was a French Christian preacher and theologian, and born in Saint-Martin-du-Frêne, in the village of Bresse of Dauphiné, bordering to Switzerland and near the Savoy. He was under the Savoyard rule, and he was educated in the University of Lyon, was fluent in both French and Italian, became an expert in Latin, Hebrew and Greek as well, learned German and started reading widely in comparative theology. And everyone agreed he was probably one of the most learned men in Europe, equal if not superior to Calvin, who was in Geneva by now. Castellio went further than Calvin, however, and said he was the first really profound Christian thinker to articulate the idea of universal tolerance. He said that there should be universal religious toleration, whether you're a Protestant or a Catholic or a whatever, and that it should be up to the scholars to work out the truth. You can't function as a scholar unless you have freedom of thought, freedom of research. And if you go from the assumption that God is good and that therefore the secrets of the kingdom of God are there to be discerned, as Christ said, knock and you shall be answered. So he took that as his marching orders. But unfortunately, he was way ahead of his time, because that didn't become generally established till like the 18th century, Voltaire and co., the Age of Enlightenment. He was like an Enlightenment thinker who popped up 200 years too early. And Voltaire wrote, we can measure the virulence of the tyranny of the persecution to which Castellio was exposed at Calvin's instance, although Castellio was a far greater scholar than he, whose jealousy drove him out of Geneva. And that's what happened. So Calvin couldn't stand this young mind preaching universal toleration. He'd got stuck on the journey of knowledge at a certain place, and felt that the spiritual sword should in Calvin's theocratic Geneva should exclude certain people. So witches, burn them, that's fine. And as for Unitarians who question the Trinity, well, execute them. And Calvin notoriously executed some Unitarians, which Castellio said this is wrong. You can't do that. But for that he was forced to leave the city. Anyway, he went on. He went to the University of Basel, became a Master of Arts and a teacher. He picked up teaching degrees as a physician. And he was deeply, deeply disturbed when Servetus was killed by Calvin and the good city fathers of Geneva. A stain on them, really. So we remember him today, Castellio, but very few people have heard of him, and he doesn't, as I say, he was a couple of 100 years early. But if you look back on his thinking, it's exactly what the Enlightenment was all about. And it's where I'm coming from, I do believe in obviously freedom of scholarship, freedom of thought, but that brings with it the duty to get things right. So in my commentaries, say on the Gospels or the Quran, I'm really meticulous in getting the information accurate as much as possible. Not just, like having a rant, but no, it's actually, this is probably what actually is the case. It probably is the case that Jesus did know the Psalms of Solomon. And by the way, in that literature, God is often referred to as the Father. And I also, in the commentary on St. Matthew, talk about there are certain hymns found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which one can assume Jesus was familiar with, among the Essenes. And they also talk about God as the Father. So I think we can, scholarship has now advanced a long way since Servetus and Calvin. and Castellio were all arguing. We found these things like the Nag Hammadi texts, the Gnostic texts. We found the Dead Sea Scrolls. We know much more about the esoteric Kabbalah and about the sources of Gnosticism. And I think that's important. 400 years after these people were thinking, it's time to, move on and say, look, I mean, if we're going to be faithful to wisdom, the goddess of wisdom, which is, as philosophers, what we should be doing, then we have to be faithful to wisdom. We can't sort of fake it. So anyway, those are some of the Christians we celebrate today, and it's also Saint Marcellus and other saints in the Christian world. In the Buddhist world, we celebrate Drugpa Kunli, he's known as the madman of the dragon lineage in Tibet. He was a crazy wisdom teacher, and in the tradition of Padmasambhava, teaching enlightenment path using the Dorje energy, the thunderbolt energy. He lived from 1455 to 1529. His life overlapped to some extent with Castellio.
Yeah.
Castellio and him would have got on very well, I'm sure. I don't think Castellio knew about Buddhism and didn't understand Eastern thought, but he would have loved it. And Drugpa Kunli wanted to find the path to enlightenment for everybody. He was impatient. We also celebrate, for culture and science, Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, 1867 to 1959, who called his son Taliesin. He was quite interested in the Celtic and Druid stories. And he created some great buildings with nature and interior spaces sort of blended. One of the great modern architects. We also celebrate today for pagans Rhadamanthus, who's the son of Zeus and Europa, and became the ruler and judge of the Greek afterlife, Elysium. Now, why is he in my Book of Saints and Sages? Isn't he a mythical figure? Okay, well, I'm arguing that probably he was modelled on certain rulers of Crete, who, would have been like the inspired Minoan culture heroes. So behind the stories of Rhadamanthus, there was probably a lineage of priest kings or something. And we also have Abdul Qadir Bedil, a mystical poet from Afghanistan for our Muslim community, 1665 to 1723. Afghanistan is full of these amazing literary poets and Sufis, and I've met some of the living ones. I don't think the Soviet Union should have ever invaded. I don't think America should have invaded. I think that's not how you deal with the Afghans. You talk to them and you share poetry, as I have done in the past. We also celebrate, for Jewish thinkers, Arthur Goodhart, who became Professor of Law at the University of Oxford and Chairman of the International Law Association, which is based in Russell Square. I used to go there and find books on international peace. And we also celebrate today, for Chinese thinkers, a Dutchman, R.H. van Gulik, who was a sinologist, expert in Dutch. And he was not himself Chinese, but he became a great expert on Chinese thought. So, yes, so they're all pretty awesome, really. The purpose of this book is just to sort of remember these people. It's an act of zikr, as the Sufis say, remembering. Because there's no point reinventing the wheel. Let's honour the people that have already invented